Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where I take a look at every episode of classic Doctor Who, plus a bunch of Big Finish audio dramas, one episode at a time, one day a week. And today, on the 10th of March, 2018, we are starting the third John Pertwee serial, which is The Ambassadors of Death, with episode 1. And this is the final story to be written by David Whittaker, the show's original script editor, and the first episode starts off with the bang. We start essentially with a bunch of story that has already happened. There is this spaceship, Mars Probe 7, that had went to Mars as part of the British rocketry program, and they stopped communicating. So you have that sort of that weirdness, the just the fact that it's not that this probe, this rocket has disappeared totally from the face of the Earth, and that when that happens, everyone, they set up a recovery, but that also stops working. So there are three, and they lose contact. So we're in a crisis point here. Unit has come in essentially just to see, hey, what happens? And, communication only breaks when the Recovery 7 links up with Mars Probe 7. Now, that's interesting about what it happens. That's what really, meanwhile, that's what gets Unit involved. The Doctor hasn't shown up yet. He is watching this all on a TV screen, which is really nice because it sort of gives the Doctor this human quality that, he's still right now he's just trying to live life. He's not worried about we have this lengthy, really fun scene with him and Liz as he's trying to repair the TARDIS because he's in exile, which sends Liz to the future by a few seconds. Then he sends himself to the future, and it's just sort of back and forth as they appear and disappear, and it's a really funny gag. I have to say the color on this episode looks amazing. This is a 7-part story. A lot of it was not in color. The restoration team did an excellent job on this episode in particular. It just looks like it's an original print. I think it might be an original print. I think this and episode 5 are the only ones that have the original prints, but everything else has been recolorized. But just the color the set design is great. The direction is great. The music is great. There are points where it sounds like a bit like a David Bowie song. In episode 1 with just this weird string melody. That being said, you have the real inciting incident, which is not everything goes dead. There's this signal, this annoying noise just comes, is heard, across the nation, across the world. This is a story that's on an international scale, mainly because, well, the Doctor, this broadcast of trying to save Mars Probe 7 has been being broadcast across the world, So it happens. There's this message. The Doctor recognizes it for what it is, so he bursts into the space to space control. Not invited. The reader has to vouch for him, which is hilarious. And it's like, right, you need to hear that. Pay attention because you're going to hear that again. They hear it again, but then because it's a signal, it's a message that because they hadn't gotten a reply yet. But then the big reveal is then it happens a third time, but it's different this time because this time it's a reply. Someone's replied to the message. Now that in and of itself is interesting because it's just sort of like, well, who would have replied? There's no one listening, is there? That is the real question of the matter. Like, well, how is there a reply? There should not be a reply yet. So there's this reply happens, and then what's interesting is that shock of all shocks, that happens. Liz and the Doctor and Liz they try to triangulate where this happens. They figure out it happens from a warehouse. The Brigadier ends up takes Unit in, and there's this amazing shootout that has the Brigadier shooting guns, everyone shooting guns. It ends with this Mexican standoff, and it's just a really, really good shootout. That is a highlight of this episode. Michael Ferguson does an excellent job at directing that specific portion of the episode. It's great there. That is one thing that I think is, a really, really good portion of the episode, and does a really good job of, doing the episode justice. Is the shootout, and then the Doctor, who has not been cooperated with. We know something is going on. Some people at Space Control are involved, but we don't know. The Doctor's like, right, I need to decode that. I need computers. So it's like, and he has the message on a audio tape, because that's just sort of the thing. He goes to, like, right, I need to see on these computers. So he uses that, but then the French guy Tartalian, who is one of their lead scientists, who through this whole thing has been sort of a background character. It's like, well, he's got a gun and he threatens to shoot the Doctor, and Liz cuts cliffhanger immediately, and that is just it. It's a very punchy episode. It's like, we hit the beats, we get the punch, we go, and that is just perfect for the opening of this story. So I'm going to give The Ambassadors of Death, Episode 1, a perfect 10 out of 10. Alright, it is the of March 2018, and I just finished watching Episode 2 of The Ambassadors of Death. And I have to say that this episode continues what was great about the first one, mainly in that it is it's a really strong episode, just in general. But it also knows how to be. It knows how to be a good story, essentially, and it continues just the tension from the first episode over into the second episode very, very well. We start with the Brigadier, essentially, with a cliffhanger replay where the Brigadier has to essentially convince Tartalian not to kill the Doctor and Liz for no real reason. By doing that, he essentially wrestles the gun away from it, and the man escapes. The Doctor then uses this as a moment to realize that, hey, not everything is right here. There's a bunch of stuff that's just going wrong. And you've gotta. It's the Doctor's job, essentially, to stop it. He's got to be the one to stop it, or else nothing's gonna get done correctly. Mainly with the fact that you have the story going on. Going to have a lot of the first half of the episode is dedicated to getting the capsule down from space, getting it re-entered into the getting it re-entered into the getting it re-entered into the Earth's atmosphere, mainly because even though they've lost contact, they are able to realize that, hey, something is not only wrong with this, but there's also but there's enough evidence to show that while something is in fact going wrong, it's also it's going towards a conclusion so they get it down. They interrogate the guy they captured in the warehouse, and they figure out that he's actually, he's an ex-soldier, so that much they know. The Doctor does it from this really good, using this really good entertaining bit. And yeah, and then and you really get the feeling that that everything gets to be the ending of a story. And when that happens, with that happening, everything just sort of, it doesn't fall apart, but it gives enough pause so that everything you have everything starting to fall apart. The Doctor is able, they recover it, but they figure out that something's wrong, and when they figure out that this is wrong, they use that, and they're essentially able to they use that to deduce that not only something's wrong, but what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to cut open this capsule. So they cut open the capsule, and so they're mainly that, and that's our big cliffhanger, which is done very, very well performance wise. So I'm gonna give The Ambassadors of Death episode 2 a 10 out of 10. All right, it's the 12th of March 2018, and I just finished watching episode 3 of The Ambassadors of Death, and this episode is where things take a turn for the weird, actually. You get the Doctor and Liz cutting open. You have the Doctor cut open the capsule. The capsule gets cut open, and like it does. And that essentially, and it turns out, the astronauts aren't in there. They're in a completely different location, in an underground bunker. This is the episode where we get really into, I guess, the main characters. You have, for Sir James Quinlan, who was introduced in the last episode as the head of the as sort of one of the backers of the project, and Sir General Carrington, who was an ex-astronaut who helped take they're trying to keep the astronauts a secret from everybody in the world, and they do apologize for not telling UNIT because there was some sort of a space plague with radiation, and they're doing experiments on them. You think that this would be enough for, the Doctor to sort of be like, well, okay, I guess I'm just gonna stop investigating, but, it's the Doctor, so that doesn't happen. The Doctor just keeps on and is like, well, now I'm going to investigate even more. What are you talking about? And John Pertwee is great in this role. So he continues to investigate just this radiation around, and they keep a guard on the capsule, but then the Brigadier calls Liz away, but it's not actually the Brigadier. She's called away by the villains, and she's basically in a car chase, and our cliffhanger is her in peril, which is a really good cliffhanger. But my big problem is that a lot of plot doesn't quite move forward in this episode. It's nowhere near it's a great episode. It's an amazing episode to watch. There's a lot of really good music. The direction is nice. Michael Ferguson does a great job, and I didn't mention it in the last one, but the colorization work by the Doctor Restoration team really must be applauded for their, just for their hard work and efforts on trying to make the story back to what it looked like originally. And I like how we see the astronauts, and there's this idea that they need radiation to survive. Basically, I think the idea is that they aren't the astronauts; they're aliens, that's just a really good, interesting idea. Especially because it's like they need radiation to survive, but they really don't. Like, generally it's a good episode. That's really probably the best way to put it. It knows how to build tension and just create a decent flow. So I'm going to give The Ambassadors of Death episode 3 a 9 out of 10 just because it isn't as good as the first two parts. But it's just sort of because it just sort of stopped a little. Alright, it is the 13th of March 2018, and I just finished watching The Ambassadors of Death, episode 4. And this episode returns to form what's been great about the previous 3. We open up with Liz being saved, only to be captured and taken to a secret bunker, where the 3 astronauts they're being kept in radiation. She has to work with Lennox, played by Cyril Shaps, on creating a form of a control device for the astronauts, because the people in charge, which includes the French Tiltalian, and another guy who I don't remember his name off the top of my head, are working for Quinlan, and I'm guessing Carrington as well, as they want to raid specific military installations and basically cause fear about aliens from space. That in and of itself is a very, very interesting sort of thing, as you have villains who they don't really get. The motivation isn't really explained fully, mainly because it's the whole thing going against, like, why would a villain explain their plan to the person that they've locked up, and not just let them be in the dark whilst waiting for things to work. So you have the Doctor essentially coming and basically coming in, deducing that everyone's been lying to them. The Doctor he's been making leeway on the codes, and he's about to figure out, really, just completely by accident, what our villains of the story are doing, which is a very interesting sort of sequence, because it doesn't quite make our villains seem dumb, but it does make me pause for a moment to be like, well, they had this great plan, but now they're just going to, let it sort of, they're going to let everything, go to waste, because, because of everything that's been happening, that I find really interesting. Mainly because it's just sort of a thing that happens in the story, but you you get the feeling that everything has, of course, been building to this. It's a very, very good episode. And, you know, I think, you know, I feel like it's, it knows what it wants to be. You have Liz then being able to show that, she can make, and she can at least try to make her own escape and, you know, get out of her bad situation. Which is, you know, really good for her character development. And, you know, I really like the way what Liz is sort of portrayed as in this episode, even though she gets captured again. So, you know, everything just sort of does a good job in this story. So I'm going to give Doctor Who the Ambassadors of Death, episode 4, a 10 out of 10. Alright, it is the 14th of March, 2018, and I just finished watching episode 5 of The Ambassadors of Death, and this episode, much like episode 3, feels like it's, you know, filler. But that being said, it's very, very good filler. Like, it is solid when it knows what it wants to be. Like, it knows that it is not exactly a serious story. I mean, none of this, that is not, but, I mean, because a lot of this is, we're getting the Doctor into space basically to meet with Recovery 7, and just try to figure out what went on, because they figured out that after seeing all of the goings on, everyone has a pretty good idea that they know that it is humans, that, you know, these astronauts, they aren't the astronauts, they're aliens, so, you know, they're going to pilot it, and there's a lot of risk involved, because you've got this this whole story that the fuel that's going to be used in production is basically, it's not one of those, you know, it's an unstable fuel. They don't quite know what it is, so but they're going to use it anyway, and the Doctor's going to be the one to go into space, because he's the one who's able, essentially, to do it. He's the one who can stand the G-force, and he's the one who can really, you know, get everything going. So he's going to go into space, and you have a lot of the episode people sabotaging the Doctor before the big cliffhanger is that the Doctor takes off, and, well, we don't quite know. Yeah, there's a very good chance that he is going to die, actually. It's a very, very dangerous cliffhanger, so to speak. And I have to say, it's really good. You also have a lot of storyline with Lennox, who is just the sort of nervous guy who let Liz escape. Well, they do the opposite thing. He escapes, he goes to unit, he demands protective custody, explains, right, here's what happened with me, this is, you know, here's what's going on, I didn't want to do this, they forced me to do it, basically, so, you know, it's not my fault. So it's like, please, so just, you know, lock me up,
keep him in protective custody, and I'll be able to tell you everything when I need to tell everything to the Brigadier. When he gets back, let him know that I'm here. Which, that is, that's something really, really good. Like, and then the villains find out about this, and they kill him with radiation, and they disconnect sort of his help button, which is a really, really, sort of intimidating end to the story. I really like what they did with the story. So, with all this, so I'm going to give The Ambassadors of Death, episode 5, even though it is a middle episode, and it really doesn't quite know how to work as a full story, as a sort of full episode with pacing, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.
Alright, it is the 29th of March, 2018. I apologize for the 2 or so weeks off. Life got in the way, and I could not sit down to watch a single episode of Doctor Who in that time. I tried. I'm sorry. And I remember pretty much that I liked episode 5. And remember most of episode 5. But we're at episode 6 now, and this is one where the Doctor makes it on to... we have the Doctor making it out of the atmosphere and making contact with Mars Probe 7, and we get this big reveal that the ambassadors of death of the title are just regular ambassadors to the human race. They aren't here to hurt anyone. They're aliens, and they're revealed in the episode later on to, look like, they look horrifying, but they're genuinely nice people. They just look different. They sent the ambassadors to broker first contact with Earthlings. We don't really get their motivations. They're only really just keeping the 3 astronauts alive and well, they are all convinced that they basically have they've been stuck in quarantine, so they're watching football on a TV, which is just like a blue screen, and it's this weird quarantine set from earlier, but with some weird color overlays, and that's really cool. But they're not evil. This is the second story in a row where we've had aliens who aren't necessarily evil. In this one, this is great. It's a great change of pace that you just and so the second half of the episode is essentially the Doctor getting down back to Earth, being captured because he obviously has made contact. And, essentially he's told to build a translator. And General Carrington, who is evil, has decided, right, I'm just going to try to make these ambassadors kill people for reasons that don't adequately get explained. There really isn't much explanation as to why they want these people to come across as totally evil, but, other than that, this episode has been solid. It's really good at basically just getting everything to feel together. Liz is great, the Brigadier's great, and the cliffhanger is the Doctor is about to be shot. Again, it's a really good cliffhanger. It's a really good story. So I'm going to give The Ambassadors of episode 6 a 10 out of 10. Alright, it is the 4th of April, 2018. I apologize for not getting back to this sooner. Again, life has been getting in the way. I'm going to try to get back to every day after this, but The Ambassadors of Death, episode 7. And I have to say, it is an amazing way to finish out the story. Mainly because this is a story that ends peacefully, and it ends peacefully, which is great to sort of have that, have a story that ends with things going right, after we had the Silurians, which ended with essentially failure, like extreme failure, is the end of the Silurians, with the Silurians all being killed. No, this time, no one really dies. The Doctor figures out a way to get to basically on live television to reveal that the ambassadors are ambassadors, and that General Carrington, the evil guy, who our main villain of the piece, he's basically to be like, he's the one who's responsible for all this, I guess you could say, torment. Yeah, basically for all the problems that has been happening. That in and of itself is just, it's really good. Again, it's one of those things. It's one of those things that David Whittaker does really, really well with the writing, even if he didn't finish the story. He only finished the outline, and it was really Terrence Dicks who wrote it, with Trevor Ray and Malcolm Hulk. It's one of those things that just I really love the story for. It leaves that real impact on you that maybe it sort of gives you this message that maybe humanity is worth existing, and that's something that I really like. It's a very interesting philosophical argument for this show to make, and also just an interesting argument in general, as you have the show at the time, just sort of being restricting itself to Earth, yet still attempting, while restricted to one setting, to tell these stories that are broad and that have a real depth to them. This isn't just a story to be, oh, look, the story is pretty and nice and haha, everything's perfect. No, we're trying to show a story that has real weight to it, and that's something that is really, really good. That is what I commend it for. I love the ending. You have the Doctor give just one line to General Carrington, who is the villain. General Carrington says, I had to do it, it was my duty. Basically, sort of just, and the Doctor just gives this line of, no, I know, I understand. And it's an interesting line to interpret, because it's sort of really, just that line gives this insight that Carrington has lost his mind, that he's not become a power-mad villain, he's just become insane. He has stopped having rationality, and has just lost it in favor of just being crazy. So, that being said, so it's that sort of, that philosophy that really gets to you. So I'm going to give The Ambassadors of Death episode 7 a 10 out of 10. So that being said, we are at the end of the story, so that means we average up the scores of the episode to give The Ambassadors of Death a final score of 9.71 out of 10. Thank you, everybody, for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Marathon. Again, I apologize for it being late. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you next time when we do the Season 7 finale with Inferno.